Hello and welcome to this first look exploring session, looking at the tragedy of Albertus Wallenstein, late Duke of Friedland and General of the Emperor to the Emperor Ferdinand II, written by Henry Glapthorne and acted with good allowance at the Globe on the bankside by His Majesty's servants. It was printed in 1639, and that is all I know about the play. I know nothing about this play. Often I pretend to know nothing because that's the format, and the whole point of this is to go into this with a level of ignorance. And I encourage everybody else to be ignorant and just see how the text hits you in the face with all its surprisingly wonderful and awfulness all at once. But for once, I will be experiencing that on that level as well, because I even though I've helped format the script, I have no idea what actually happens. I have no idea what's going on and no idea who anyone is. So yeah, it's going to be fun. So it's printed in 1639. It is therefore presumably performed sometime prior to that. Precisely when is, I think, up for some debate, but sometime in the 1630s, certainly when Glapthorne was active. He definitely wrote some other plays, of which I know nothing about either. So it's not a one-off. It's there's definitely some continuity going on there. Anyway, I've whittled on about nothing whatsoever for a few minutes there. Let's get on. Reading Wallenstein, Butler, and Frederick and a Messenger is
Aliki, Chapple in Athens.
Reading Gordon, Gallas, and Brandenburg is
Hello, Lynn, Freitas in the northwestern United States.
A gateway to the text there. Reading Lesle, I don't know if it's pronounced Leslie, we're going with Lesle. Questenberg, Newman, and Waymar is
Sarah Blake, actor, writer, and director based in Germany.
Reading Kintski, Emperor, Isabella, and Emilia is
Lois Potter, based in London.
And reading Tertski, Albertus, Hungary, and Page is
Alan, very confused already.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I'll be reading stage directions. There aren't many of those. And I will step in to read Frederick when there is a clash later on. So Act 1, Scene 1. There is no prologue. Enter Kintski, Tertski, Gordon, Butler, and Lesle.
The rumour still continues.
Yes, my lord. Ill fames, though quick, are certain. It is concluded past question or dispute, for these reports, grounded on too manifest a truth, to carry doubt in them. It is confirmed this morning. He must resign.
Though a stranger, sir, and so less interested in the general's cause than you, his countryman, were you not my friend, you lied to speak it. Must our general, that soul of valour, Wallenstein, who has, like subtle lightning, purged the German air from all the hot infections foreign war could threaten, said the health-carousing Dane, drunk with his own blood home, broke all the force with which the valiant Palatine and his aides infested had the province, given to death, that thunderbolt of war, whose very name was great as fate itself, and to its foes the Swedish king? And must he now, his age is candied o'er with victories, be enforced to a base resignation? Death, he's damned that dare but mutter it.
And they were so who first occasioned it would bring much comfort to all true soldiers.
'Tis concluded, sir, past all redemption. They are doubly damned for their ingratitude. Displace a man to whom they owe their lives, one whom, my lords, we have seen in the heat and bravery of a fight cheer up his fainting and disheartened troops, even when his body seemed but all one wound, that it appeared a little island circled round with the purple deluge of his blood, who, when war's quiritors, the big-mouthed drums and surly trumpets sung his army's dirge, that fatal music swelled his sprightly sense more than soft hymns at nuptials.
Ah, his glories are so well known to us, we need not urge their reputation. But 'tis past my thoughts why on the sudden he should be compelled to give his charge up.
When the world believed he should have had a double triumph in the honour of his victories.
I'll tell you. There is in princes' courts a lean-faced monster termed envy, reigning in unworthy breasts to fame's heroic sons such as know to cringe with subtle motion to their prince's smiles, adore his footsteps and his awful nods, and can, like asps, instill into his ears a sweet yet killing venom. These thin souls, when the blunt soldier has on piles of wounds built up his country's peace, whisper, "Beware, in time, my lord, lest he do grow too great." This meeting with the jealous prince fears, as princes still are fearful of the greatness of rising active subjects, breeds resolves to cut up that prop, leaning on which themselves have stood firm and unshaken on their base. And these court parasites, and the emperor's weak distrusts, pulls this disgrace on Friedland, which if he with an effeminate patience do put up, may all the laurels growing on his crest be turned to cypress, serving for no use but to adorn his funerals.
Soft, the general's here himself. My gracious lord, the duke.
Our thrice redoubted general.
For entered has Wallenstein and Ilor. Though sadly muted.
That sound awakes my drowsy soul. Pray, good my lords, what do you behold, degenerate, in my looks, showing me unworthy still of that great title?
And I would pull my eyes out, should they convey into my soul a thought tending to so much sacrilege to honour and perfect masculine virtue.
Yet I must put off that glorious title, like a garment, old and unfit for wearing. Oh, my lords, our honours individual with our souls grows to that essence, as to the hand or cheek the native whiteness, and to have that torn, lugged off by violent torture is our sufferance beyond the strength of patience. Is not, lords?
Yes, and look how far the noble, immaterial soul transcends the duller body. So much torments inflicted on the purer mind surpasses corporeal punishments.
It is true. Philosophy, which, even amongst soldiers whose only learning is comprised in arms, is granted as indisputable. My lords, what will the world that sometimes stood at gaze, frightened with awful terror of my deeds, imagine to behold me in my age deprived of all those titles, all those glories which have grown up with me even from my youth, which I have purchased with the expense of wounds more numerous than I've veins? 'Twill straight conclude either my age is doting, and returned into a second childhood, and unfit to manage the glorious warfare and the big commands of martial discipline, or that my faith is on the sudden like a fair ripe fruit, by the too hot kisses of the lascivious sun betrayed to rottenness by haughty pride or vain ambition tainted.
So blast at least, my lord, in their too nice esteem your former actions.
Wrap in clouds of shame your shining virtues.
True, for twixt these two extremes there is no means to scape by. Think then, lords, what an inhumane, irreligious wrong it is, both to my honour and my faith, to be deprived thus basely of that charge which I've performed with care and good success. And what ingratitude 'tis in this prince, this emperor, thus to reward my trust, when his own soul can witness 'twas myself that from the Swede, the Palatine, and Dane rescued his eagles, who else had mewed their plumes and from their height been forced to perch on earth. I took the reeling pillars of his state and pitched them firm and even. Of this his heaven I've been the Atlas. I did fight for him when every conflict was a victory, each field of battle was a field of glory. Yet, as my truths and loyalties reward, I am deprived, unkindly, even in peace, of all my glories purchased in the war.
Exeter, think with whom your shining honours in the scale balance, with one so far beneath your worst. We are engaged in reputation never, he being so far inferior to ourselves, to obey his commands.
Matthias Gallas, your late field marshal.
His very name begets new horror in me, noblest friends. Co-partners with me in whatever dangers attends triumphant war, whom I have led in crimson fields through rising seas of blood that you have swum, not marched to victory. Would it not breed afflictions in your souls, your noble, honest souls, to see your poor yet always loving general at this age, now when his head's grown white beneath his helm, discarded from his office, and shook off as birds their feathers mew, or stags their horns, those useless excrements, in hope that fresher will in the old places grow? Should I do this, I then might trail my waving ensigns in the dust, as at my honor's funeral, and break my sword against my own target. Nay, put off all pomp and pride of war, and like that vain resemblance of a star, a comet, fall by my own fire consumed to earth.
Great sir, though a stranger to you by birth and nation, yet the strict alliance I've to your princely nobleness enjoins me, under your pardon, and with the allowance of these brave counts your followers, to deliver my zealous counsel to you.
Noble Scot, use your discretion freely.
Thus, great sir, then, thought be the power of princes to prescribe laws to their subjects. 'Tis their subjects' wills must put those laws in act. 'Tis their obedience which are the ablest sinews of the state, and 'twere barbarous cruelty to employ their hands against themselves, a strange injustice to make their proper virtue instrument of their own ruin.
Leslie speaks home.
And to much purpose.
Do not, lords, misunderstand my meaning. I speak not this that I condemn authority, or dislike order in everything without preeminence in title of command. Our trade, the warfare, could not subsist, but to inform our general, our too much injured general, that it is no such strange crime to disobey a prince in things unjust. And can there be a greater or shamefuler injustice than for Caesar by his mandate to enforce him to resign his glorious charge up?
For a shame.
An utter shame. An abominable disgrace to all that honour virtue should we suffer it.
Here then ends what I would have uttered. Of what force are Caesar's mandates when their real loves has disannulled them? Circled with these hearts, these bullocks of brave hearts, what need have you to acknowledge any emperor but yourself? Yourself great duke, whose merit lays just claim to that supremest title.
And we have an error there. I suspect this is someone else, but for the moment, Leslie, continue.
Okay. Pray once more, give me your patience. Rashness, gentlemen, gives the first onset fiercely, then recoils as wasps when they have lost their stings. Affairs of this high consequence do require mature deliberation to confirm our own strength for the exploit. 'Twere fit we did conjoin with Saxon, Weimar, and Gustavus Horn, and the other bold confederates. How likes your grace this project?
The drum and fife, trumpet and cannon, when their loud voices sing Ios to victory, could ne'er beget more music in my ravished sense. Best friend, I am so bankrupt grown in my extent of gratitude that, trust me, I could weep to see myself so far outdone in friendship. I am engaged in honor to go on that this insulting emperor by his fall to gain fit means to gratify your loves. Thou airy name of loyalty, hence to heaven, and find like smoke a burial in the clouds. Thus I expire thy essence. Henceforth I'll acknowledge no other emperor but these worthiest hearts.
And we, great Duke, henceforth will ne'er submit to any rule but yours, which is to confirm, as sure as fate had sealed it. On your sword, we'll take a solemn and religious oath for the performance.
We all swear.
We all swear it.
And if any should be so basely perjured as to break, but in a thought this sacramental faith, let our just angers fall as heavy on him as heaven's most horrid curses, sink his name like some prodigy despised by light into forgetfulness.
Yeah.
So now, methinks I stand like a colossus, through whose spacious arch flows the vast sea of honor, without power or natural force to ebb. Again, best friends. The early day, though from the gorgeous east she breaks, adorned with chains of liquid pearl, cannot achieve full luster till the sun gild her pale cheeks with brightness. Nor can we clothe the yet infant dawning of our hopes in perfect robes of light till we have attired them in the sparkling rays of blood, imperial blood. Come, let's go unresolved, like those brave men who in their awful palms do bear about their destinies and can command even fate itself. Allow a dispatch with speed advices to the Marquis Brandenburg, Weimar, and Count de Arheim that we entreat at personal meeting with them all at Dresden. Come, lords, whene'er the Roman eagle falls, will mourning triumph at her funerals.
Exeunt Wallenstein, Tertski, Kintski, et al. Leslie remains.
So, things once well begun are half perform the managing. An act with close and hidden practice among the wise and politic people brings assured success. Broad open ways the heavy snail does take, while untrod paths best please the subtle snake.
And exit Leslie, end of scene 1. Well, I mean, I really liked that. I'm not wholly sure I knew what was going on some of the time, because it's very florid, isn't it? I mean, there's purple leaking everywhere. Those passages are wide, and it's got impact, and I think on stage that would function well. Because you'd be able to see people, and it's got a certain oomph to it. We haven't had for a while. Actually, we haven't had anything that's quite so oomphy as this. I've missed oomphy. That's the technical term I'm using. Thoughts on the room, Lynn?
I thought it was a little much.
Really?
For me, this morning where I am, it just took too long to say Wallenstein, a very successful general, is aging, and the emperor has decided to replace him, and many of the important people, the important people in the administration, counts or whatever, disagree with that decision, and they decide not to honor it, to basically say, nah, this guy is to disobey the emperor. So, that's interesting. That's very high stakes. It's that, they're basically committing treason or agreeing to commit treason, although supposedly for honorable reasons. So this is, a good hook for a political drama, but it just, it takes a little too long to get all that out.
Aliki, then Lois.
I don't know. I rather enjoyed the contrast between the flowery imagery and the extremely martial, the flowery way of putting it and the extremely martial imagery of swimming in blood for victory and all of that. It was fairly brisk about it, I thought. I mean, no sooner has Leslie said, oh, well, you probably shouldn't accept this. It's all right to rise up against an emperor who does you wrong. Then everybody's like, yep, let's go. We know who our allies are. Bang, bang, bang.
Lois, then Alan.
Yeah, I think I think it's an effective scene. I think, if anything, there are rather too many people in it. I mean, they don't characterize themselves at all by anything they do. So that may be the point, just to suggest that Wallenstein has a lot of support. But it would be more interesting if there were more sense of character in it. However, there's also the whole context of this. I mean, for an audience watching this in the 1630s, these guys are all on the wrong side. I mean, they're talking about their victories against the Palatine. And that, of course, is the husband of James I's daughter.
That's true.
But that was the Protestant cause. These people are all on the Catholic cause. And troops from England were fighting against them. I'm finding it very interesting that there are all these Scots fighting with the Catholic.
Yeah, because the Scots were pretty decidedly Protestant.
Yeah, well, some of them were. I mean, but people who supported Mary Queen of Scots are people who are now in exile and so on. I'm not sure I mean, I don't know that much about the 30 Years' War, but we're in it. And it was an extremely complicated period with lots of changing of sides and unlikely allies and so on. But anyway, this whole background would clearly be known to the early audiences in a way that it isn't to us. And so all these people are pretty suspect to begin with anyway.
And yeah, and I think that does come across. I mean, it's I really just like the opening line. The rumor still continues. I mean, it's like this little tell us more. And I like that that sort of hook to that. And there's lots of little hooks in this that I'm quite liking, because there's a lot of people doing exposition here. But I think they sort of get away with it. Alan.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's mentioned in the dramatis personae that Leslie, Gordon, and t'other one who we haven't heard much from are actually Scots mercenaries. So their loyalty is largely to their own purses.
And so yeah, who are all of these people? How do they relate to each other? We're sort of getting some splashes of colour here, but we're not necessarily getting too much infilling yet. Sarah.
So we're getting a certain amount, because I mean, Leslie says first to Wallenstein's friends and then to him himself, like, oh well, okay, I'm a stranger here, obviously, but I think this is outrageous. So that sets up the scenario very quickly, that he's the objective outsider who's come in but just thinks this general is amazing and wants to help, and appears to be very frank and fully supportive and gives all this advice. And then right at the end, after everyone else is gone, it's like he suddenly rips off his mask and starts twirling his mustache, and it's like it's clear from that little speech at the end that he's actually there to make mischief. So I don't know, in a way, for all it's so purple, it does actually do quite a lot in terms of setting up these characters, and we know now that Leslie clearly has alternative motives. We're not quite sure who he's working for or why he's doing it, but he's clearly out for Wallenstein. He's clearly there to do him some damage, and the way he's just kind of wandered in there and insinuated himself amongst with the general and his cohorts is quite masterful, really, and all that's been done in one scene. So
Lois.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether Leslie is a villain in this thing. It's really hard to tell at this point, although I think an audience in the 1630s might have been fairly anti-Scots. I mean, they'd already refused to accept the prayer book, I think, that Charles I was trying to force on them. They wouldn't have had a terribly good image with an English audience. And of course, if this play is as late as it seems to be, we're in the reign of Charles I rather than James, and so there's no very strong feeling that they have to flatter the Scots. But he doesn't really say anything that suggests that he's being devious, apart from that image of the snake, and the snake is contrasted with the snail anyway. So and the snail's not a terribly attractive image either. He seems mainly just to be saying that this thing has started well, and that's half the battle, really.
Sarah. Muted at present.
I took that quite differently. Maybe it's because I was reading it, but like, yeah. So he's like basically saying once things are well begun, they're half performed already. So
Yeah.
he's like he's laid the foundation for this. So I took that to mean like, oh, I've gained their trust. And he's talking about acting with close and hidden practice amongst the wise and politic people brings assured success. Yeah, okay, I see what you mean. It could be that he's talking about the advice that he's given them, but I don't know. I guess it's ambiguous. It's ambiguous, but I took that to mean that he was actually, had a dire ulterior motive. But I mean, yeah, no, you're right. It could be taken either way, I guess. Yeah.
He may just be watching to see how this progresses. I mean, ultimately, you don't want to be on the losing side on this kind of gambit. And, it is a gambit. It's a risk. They don't know how it's going to end up. Lynn.
Yeah, I think it's really quite ambiguous because, well begun is half done. And, we don't know for sure that what Lesle is trying to achieve is a bad thing, is not the side of right. He's done a persuasive job of defending Wallenstein's fitness to lead. But it is structurally unusual for a good character to be especially in a tragedy, to be the last one on stage to make some sort of comment. That's a typical gambit for an evil character, for a bad actor, to have a little moment with the audience to say, "Wahaha, my plans are going really well." So structurally, we expect that to be coming from a malefactor, not
I think there is that slight discordant note, but it's not a strident one, shall we say?
I think we really aren't supposed to know what to think at this point.
Yeah,
and and you're right. It is a chunky scene, but that it's certainly in relation to the length of the play. This is not a long play. We're only doing 2 sessions on it, which is why we have time to actually chat about it. As opposed to when we do Ben Jonson, we're sort of cram it in. Lois, did you want to leave it?
That the speech reminds me of one in The White Devil, actually, which Flaminio speaks at the end of a scene, and where he definitely is a villain. And he says something about how if you're trying to get to the top, you have to wind your way I think he speaks of the subtle windings of a winter's snake. So who knows policy and her wide affect will find her ways winding and indirect. And that certainly is a generalization about policy, that sort of sinister word, political astuteness or Machiavellianism. So, I mean, I think the speech sort of derives from that in some way, but he may just be saying, it depends a bit on how you take wise and politic people, I think, whether that just means great statesmen or whether it means basically Machiavels.
Anyway, we must go on and gather some more data. Act 1, Scene 2. We're going to go over to the Emperor. We've heard about the Emperor. Let's have him enter. Enter Emperor Gallas and Questenberg.
He'll not resign then.
'Tis so feared. The greatness of his vast spirit never will admit resignation of those honours which he hath with such felicity enjoyed.
Besides, my lord, the army is so much bewitched with love of this arch traitor Wallenstein, they rather put off their due allegiance unto you, their natural sovereign, nay, give up their lives than yield to any act which may concern his removal.
Can this be possible? Treason shall never brave us at our doors while I can wield a sword. Ingrateful slave, whom I have raised from such an abject lowness, his family did scarcely bear a name in common gentry, to the very height, the type of honor. That he should do this, and like the viper's young devour that heart that bred and nourished him, more afflicts my soul than all the wrongs and troubles which my foes have inflicted upon my fame and empire. Matthias Gallas, let it be your charge to see new forces levied to oppose against this arch rebel.
My lord, I've learned in the practiced school of war that to oppose fresh, unexperienced troops against the flower of old and hardened soldiers is but as if amongst hungry lions we should cast resistless infants, and by their weak force hope to overcome the furious beasts. Dread sir, my counsel always has had that success to be accounted faithful to my prince. Fear it not. Follow then my poor advice. Meet treachery with policy, and try if you the ambitious traitor can surprise. The head once off, the weak and fainting limbs, like scarce dried boughs, like seared, dried boughs, by an impetuous wind torn from an aged oak, will fall to earth and be consumed to ashes.
It shall be so. Lord Questenberg, with all convenient speed, dispatch a trusty messenger unto the King of Hungary. Command his presence with his most able legions for the safeguard of our own person. In such like affairs which do concern the uncertain rule of states, wise men should always be above their fates.
And they exit. Okay, so yeah, the Emperor's created a situation that's quite difficult to handle, actually, as he looks at the politics. I think they might have made a poor political choice that is has clearly already backfired on them. A very short scene in contrast to the last one. It sort of gets in and gets out very quickly because it wants to sort of move on with the rest of the plot, I suspect. But it's good that we've got a response to the opening. And what I also really like is it opens with another question. We keep having these I say keep, we've had two scenes, but this sort of way of starting with impetus, with something that draws us in, and I like that. But you you almost feel like they burst on, just going, really, what? This is what, and it's like it's sort of almost mid scene the way it starts, and that sort of that gives it a nice energy to it, which is, I say, for a scene that is basically just exposition again, setting up some characters visually. Lois.
I find it interesting that both Leslie's speech at the end of the previous scene and the Emperor's at the end of this scene refer to what wise men do. What's politically advantageous, what heads of state should know. I mean, there's an awful lot of kind of generalization about politics.
Yes. Other thoughts? It wasn't a very long scene, so I'm not expecting, vast amounts of discourse. But Lois again.
Well, the other thing is just that, I mean, they have decided not to approach Wallenstein's treason with an army, but essentially to try by some sort of stratagem to kill him. I think that's the point of that suggestion that he takes.
Yeah, our soldiers aren't used to this stuff. His are, because we gave him the army. It's just like, secure the transition of power there before you make him resign. Aliki.
Yeah, I quite liked that. Let's just not have cannon fodder, okay? That's a bad idea. But yes, as you point out, it just shows the inadvisability of having the person that the army is personally loyal to pissed off at you.
It's they've given him too much power, and when they try to take the power away by just saying, "Would you like to give us the power back?" he goes, "No." Oddly enough, that's not how power works. It's interesting actually how you depict the Emperor and his court in this short scene. Are there visual signifiers to go with that? Is the implication here that actually they're a bit decadent as opposed to the martial theme or things like that? I'm just thinking now on a production note, because this play does not really give us stage directions. All we've got are sort of enter and exit. We don't really know any more about what the dynamics of this text is doing. Sarah.
Yeah, I'm finding the contrast with Sejanus really interesting because, there you had a play about a general doing stuff for an emperor and, then wanting more ambition than the emperor was prepared to give him. And then it all went pear-shaped. And I mean, on the surface, you've got a very similar plot here, but the characterization is much more, we've only just started, but so far at least, it's much more ambiguous because there you kind of knew straight away, who was meant to be the bad guy and who was kind of the slightly less bad guy. But here, I'm not entirely sure how much of this is down to Wallenstein's ambition, and how much of it is down to the emperor just being a bit rubbish and quite what the politics are.
Yeah, and we have encountered this kind of situation of, as an opening gambit, or a similar thing to do with, who holds the power and who's going to relinquish power, or for that matter, wants a job in power, but and don't get it, and things like that. So there are similar texts. It's really interesting for a text that's very late in our timeline. The late 1630s. It does suddenly. I feel like we've gone back to the 1580s, 90s. There's something quite old school about some of this that I'm finding interesting. So yeah. Other thoughts? Did I see people waving? I think I did. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, it was a short scene. Lynn.
I was just going to say, I was reminded of Sejanus as well. Powerful general, gets a little too big for his boots, but it also, it's different because we know from the beginning that Sejanus is arrogant and infinitely ambitious, and Wallenstein seems to be more dutiful and kind of has to be persuaded to rebel. It seems like his inclination is like, I'm getting fired, that's kind of a bummer. And the other guys talk him into refusing to accept his dismissal.
And he gets long, noble speeches in front of people. He doesn't talk to the audience in the same way. Lois.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of pattern here. With Johnson, people have always pointed out that the relationship between Tiberius and Sejanus is rather like that between Volpone and Mosca. And we haven't done, I think, the Biron plays yet of Chapman, but those involve Henry IV of France and the Marshal Biron. The whole situation, in other words, of a ruler and then a powerful figure whom he needs, but then who turns against him. I think that must be the kind of template for heroic tragedy, certainly in Glapthorne's mind. But it's also, an extremely recent history. Some probably look up the date of what happened to Wallenstein, but it would be within most people's memories.
Yes, I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but it's not that long ago. In as the crow flies. Anyway, we have another scene to do as we gather some more information. So we go to Act 1, Scene 3, enter Albertus, a different Albertus, and Newman.
Pox upon her, sir, and for her sake, on all good faces. Must you sigh and whine and make a face worse than a zealous drunkard? Does o'er dead musty whine because she is beauteous? We soldiers do not use to engender with a physiognomy, nor, as the learned term it, cohabit with a handsome nose or lip. There are some parts beneath the waist, I take it, more useful for a man of arms.
Colonel, no more of this.
Should I ask you the reason why you love her, you must answer, 'tis for the sport. As for what other reason women were made, unless to prick upon a clout or starch, transcends my best philosophy. And for that purpose, a short coat frister, that as she milks each morning bedews the cool grass with a virgin moisture, as useful is, and active. Sound afar, that's certain granted. Pray, my lord, remember she's but your mother's gentlewoman, and who perhaps the butler has oftener folded up than ere he did his table linen.
No more, you'll anger me.
You'll anger me again, then. We imps of Mars should know no other mistresses than what the camp contains. I ne'er dost love in the field, marry in the city, I've had copulation with all trades. But one poor sutler's wife, and she as fair too as was the kettle which she boiled her beef in. Oh, how the sweet smell of her amber grease and kitchen stuff perfumed my greedy nostrils. Yet on this beauty doted I, inspired by insurrection of the flesh, and gave her to cuckold the good corporal her husband.
Enter Isabella.
Oh, that's
You're
still
still
me.
talking.
Oh, man. 10 comely dollars and the devil take her. She paid me with a pox. But see, here comes the Lady of the Lake, for whom you good Sir Lancelot make these lamentations. Be not you bashful now, but fall on boldly, hearts. Let me drill her for you, if her body be under musket proof. 'Tis 10 to 1 my Morris bike shall enter to her. To her!
Exit Newman.
Surprised by him alone. Oh, my just fears.
My cruel fair one, should you shun his sight, whose very soul moves in your eyes? Or why should your blessed voice speak health to all the world, yet threaten death to me? Look on my youth, my hopeful youth, which in the active war hath taught old soldiers discipline. Behold it, nipped by the cold frost of your icy beauty, as in a fever languishing to nothing, forgetful of the noble pride and strength it has so lately boasted. 'Tis unjust to see me still over my foes victorious, made by myself your captive, to insult over your suppliant vassal. Would those eyes which can contract light's orb into a glance become impoverished by a smile? Those cheeks sully their naked tincture? Should they blush at your mind's cruelty? 'Twould rather add to the illustrious excellence.
My noble lord.
Stay, you must not speak yet. There's not an accent issuing from your lips, but has the power, should thunder speak, to charm, to peaceful quiet the affrighted, the world, and would strike dumb my passion. Best of virgins, there is not that disparity between our births, as there's unequal difference between our hearts. Mine's all on fire, dare combat with the sun for heat's priority. Yours, mountain snow, cold as the north and cruel as my fortunes. Yet you may make them equal as your eyes are, by yielding up that fort, which will, when time has given it ceremonious privilege, be perhaps by some unworthy groom, without resistance, surprised and entered.
My lord, bad custom is become in men a second nature to deceive poor virgins by their flatteries. Noble youth, that I do love you dearly, may these tears shed for your folly testify. Look back into your priceless honor. Call that up to assist the fortress of your mind, assailed by foul, unlawful passion. Think how base 'tis to rob a silly orphan of her dowry. I have no other but my virgin whiteness left to uphold my fame, naught but by virtue to my inheritance. Should you despoil me of that fair portion by your lust, my memory would, like an early rosebud by that tempest, die on its own stalk blasted.
I do dream, sure.
Women's fames, sir, are like thin crystal glasses, by a breath blown into excellent form, and by a touch cracked or quite broken. Say I should consent to your desires. Your appetite once sated, you would repent the fact. When you should see yourself surrounded in a mist of cares, view bashful virgins point at you as at some hateful prodigy, hear matrons cry, "There goes the lustful thief that glories in the spoil of innocent virgins, that foul thief that has 100 eyes to let lust in at, as many tongues to give his wild thoughts utterance."
Sure, some angel inhabits here. This cannot be a mansion for mortal frailty. Sweet farewell, good night. I would not have my over-saucy love commit a rude intrusion on thy peace, though parting with thee be more torment to me than to forgo mine eyes. May all the joys of healthful slumbers crown thy bed, thy dreams be free from paraphrasing on my memory. Lest it affright you, once more, dear, good night. While you with pleasing happy sleep subless, I'll seek some way to my eternal rest.
Exit, end of Act 1. Okay, that's an interesting scene. We have, Albertus going, "I'm in love," and Newman going, "Well, women." Yeah, and being quite obnoxious is Newman. It's just reminding me of specific characters from Midsummer. Hmm?
I just cracked at you.
Did you?
Should I not have? Was
I'm
that a
talking
different?
about a film from a few years ago. Midsommar, I suppose is how you pronounce it.
Never
mind.
You're thinking Midsummer Murders.
No, I'm thinking of a folk horror film. Don't worry, he dies. So spoilers there. Sorry. They all die. No, they don't all die. Anyway, the horrible men pretty much all die, so it's fine. So we've got this, and then we have this exchange between Isabella and Albertus, and it's a thing. Lois.
Yeah, it's rather a weird scene. I mean, you naturally assume that given how frightened she is of him, and then how obsessed he seems to be with her, that the scene's going to end with him carrying her off to rape her. And instead, he says, "Gosh, yes, you have a point there. Goodbye, dear, and I'm going to go and see if I can die." I mean, that seems to be the point of "I'll seek some way to my eternal rest."
Yeah,
I mean, that was quick. Yes.
I mean, this play doesn't hang about, actually. I mean, it really does sort of go from one thing to another. It's having those big sweeps. Aliki.
I mean, I hope he's a very young man, because it's so mean of you not to sleep with me. Oh, no. Oh, you are virtuous. I will go get myself killed is really inexcusable in anybody past 18 or so.
Yeah.
It does feel young, doesn't he? It does feel like, there's something very teenagery about it, and also his mate as well, Newman. There's something really not experienced in the world quality to that. Lynn?
Yeah, yes. So this was sort of a surprise, because we got the political tragedy, or the political history is rolling. We know what's going on there, and then all of a sudden we have kind of basically something from erotic comedy, just sort of tossed in there. The emperor's son is in love with a woman who is somewhat below his station, and both in the political plot and then this plot, we're left a little not knowing what to think about people. Is our plotting Scotsman really just out for himself, or does he honestly believe that Wallenstein should not be dismissed, and doing what he thinks is right? And is like, what kind of person is Albertus? He's like filled with desire, and when the object of his desire says, "All I have is my reputation, is my chastity. You would take from me the only thing I have. Why would you do that?" And he's like, "Oh, sorry." But he doesn't say, "No, my intentions are honorable. I want to marry you." He doesn't say that. So I'm getting like a lot of mixed signals, or there's just like a lot of gaps where information we would like to have is missing. So that's very intriguing.
Yeah, just note that Albertus is Wallenstein's son, and that's where Newman is interesting, because he's a soldier, and these are people who presumably, on some level, are used to the soldier life, the moving from camp to camp. Hence the fact that Newman's not the most constructed person in the universe. Lois.
Yeah, things do happen awfully quickly, and to some extent, I think rather inconsistently. I mean, I can't make out whether Isabella really does love him, or just, at one point she says she does, and then the rest of it's all about, for heaven's sakes, don't violate my chastity. But what Albertus says just before that is really pretty appalling. And he says that they can become equal if she's by yielding up that fort, which will, when time has given it ceremonious privilege, be perhaps by some unworthy groom, without resistance, surprised and entered. I mean, that can only mean, let me seduce you, because otherwise some less worthy person will do it eventually anyway, and even apparently without resistance. I mean, what is he saying about her? It just seems a weird thing it's a lousy seduction technique anyway.
Yes, he wouldn't be the first early modern character we've encountered with a terrible seduction technique. But yeah, it's a bit extreme even for our back catalogue so far. Odd scene. Okay, we'll move on as we'll go into Act 2 and see what additional data we start getting from. As we go back to characters we've already met, we've met quite a lot for the first time. We will get a few more who we've only heard about as we go into Act 2, Scene 1. Enter Wallenstein, Waymar, Brandenburg, Tertski, Kintski, Newman, Gordon, Lesle, Butler.
The honor you have done me, mighty princes, electors of the sacred Roman Empire, by this your personal visit, does engage so much our gratitude that what ourselves and the most able forces of our friends can in requital act shall be performed. Mutual discourses often mingle souls, and as the arteries convey the blood throughout the body, they from mind to mind convey affection. To this end, we did entreat this meeting, that our conference might join in an individual league our hearts.
This happy treaty, glorious Duke, shall bring blessed peace once more with turtle's wings to soar o'er the German provinces, shall dry tears from the eyes of mothers, while the virgins shall dedicate their hours of joyful hymns in honor of your marriage.
The sturdy boar shall plough his fields in safety, and ascribe to you, great Duke, that happiness. 'Twas you who, when Bellona thundered through the land, did stop the steel-winged goddess in her course, who, when our armies, like a raging flood, did bear down all before them, did oppose the greedy torrent, boldly turned it back into its native body, and conjoined with you so inured to conquest. He were less than man and more than coward, that could fear any ensuing dangers.
You do me too much honor, mighty princes. And now, my brave confederates in arms, where business of import commands attendance, that time's misspent that's spent in useless words. I shall so please you, therefore, speak the cause in brief, which urged me to desire this conference, and give you reasons for my strange revolt from my so long loved master.
'Twas the end we only came for.
The sole reason that drew us to this meeting.
Thus in brief then, how I have served this emperor. These wounds that beautify my body cause the marks of my just loyalty given by your swords can bear me righteous witness. But good service to a malicious and ingrateful prince are rather causes of suspect than love, and when men's actions do transcend reward, they then descend to punishment. My cause is rightly stated thus, for when myself, I well may speak it without partial boast, had, like his eagle in my powerful grip, snatched up his crown that lay despised on earth, and heaved it up to heaven, borne all the weight which yours, the Danish, and the Swedish force could load these shoulders with, nay, shook it off lightly as winds in autumn do from trees their withered summer garments, then, even then, when my just hopes were pregnant with conceit of wreaths and triumphs, as a brave reward, my soldiers, by his mandates, were forbid to obey me as their general, and myself commanded straightway to resign my charge, all my great power which I had bought with blood, unto Matthias Gallas, my field marshal.
Insufferable injury.
Inhuman and unheard of ingratitude.
Nay, more. As I had been a traitor then, in fact, he did endeavor my surprise to bring me a prisoner to Vienna. Think then, lords, when both my priceless honor and my life were at one stake proposed, if I'd not cause to play my game with cunning skill, when these, my brave commanders, from their martial eyes did for my wrongs shed tears of blood, called on me as on their friend, their father, not to leave my sons, my soldiers. If I their request performed, I saved my honor and my life. But if the emperors, I gave up them both to plain perspicuous ruin. Yet in not accomplishing my master's harsh commands, the name of treason brands me. But past that, I of two evils choose to take the least, rather to draw upon me Caesar's hate than to forsake my charge. and soldiers' loves. And now being free in my own soul, as thought unsought to lords and unconstrained, I offer to assist against this emperor, this thing made up of name and voice, whom we will break as showers do bubbles which themselves of nothing had created.
So welcome is this your professed amity, no blessing heaven in its fullest bounty could have showered, could have arrived more pleasing. And to show how much we prize your friendship, let your son, young Frederick, be affianced to my daughter. The tie of nature to the tie of blood will make the union perfect.
'Tis an honor we are bound in duty to accept, my lords. In noble souls, no thought should once admit sullen delay. Our progress should be swift, as in the passage of unlimited fire in populous cities, or as winds whose force does at their birth send ope the stubborn womb of the dull earth their mother. Great designs should by great spirits only be pursued, and our last business is our speedy conference with Chancellor Oxenstern and the French ambassador. Actions that carry an unusual weight ought still to fly at an unusual height.
Exeunt Wallenstein, Brandenburg, Waymar, Tertski, Kintski, Ilor, etc., leaving behind Lesle, Butler, and Gordon.
So, let the dull half-spirited souls who strive on rare mice wings by that which fools term honesty to climb to the top of honour in their silly virtue boast, while ingenious and more active spirits in a direct line without stop or hindrance mount to their wishes. Yet in the world's esteem are held as real and endued with goodness. This Wallenstein, like a good, easy mule, have I led on by the nose to this rebellion, fired with such venom as will spread like swift infection through his soul. These two shall be my agents to achieve my ends, factors in cunning to vent forth my intentions. Lieutenant Colonel Gordon and my good Captain Butler.
We were musing what serious thought it was that could so long detain you from our conference.
Faith, I was studying on our great general's fortunes, upon which our hopes and lives depend. What think you of them?
Well, at least we're bound to hope the best. He's in himself so mighty, he seems above his fate.
His plots do carry a fair and specious outside.
'Tis a sign corruption is within them, noble friends. You are my countrymen, and if my life may preserve yours from ruin, I shall deem it religiously employed. If you discover what I intend to utter, 'twill but send my age some hours before its destined minute unto my grave, and I most willingly shall die the cause's martyr.
By our honors, no syllable shall pass our lips what you in love reveal to us.
Thus, then, friends, rebellion never yet could boast a happy or prosperous period. Wallenstein's designs are built on sand, and with the emperor's breath will be dispersed into the air. I speak not this that I do hate the man, heaven knows, I love his person, but detest the cause he justifies.
True, the dignity of princes does make whatever quarrels subjects raise against their sovereigns odious.
Shall we then, here in a strange country, violate the laws of hospitality, unmake the ancient faith ascribed unto our nation by assisting a traitor against his lawful prince, a general against that power which gave him that command? Betray that royal master to whose bounty we owe our lives? First, rather, let's resolve to open all his treasons, his proceedings unto our lord the emperor.
'Tis very just, and in my judgment, requisite.
I do approve it.
To a mere madness, and he that does mislike it bears no brain, no soul about him. Instead of slight preferment, which, should our general prosper, we at best could but expect, we shall have castles, lordships, earldoms, nay, provinces, be styled the savers, preservers of the empire, of our names as 'twere in triumph, sung about the streets, in popular acclamations. Think then, friends, how far these certain honours will surpass our airy expectations. Come, let's post straight to Vienna and inform the Emperor of all's proceedings. In this great affair we must not use our fortune, but our care.
And off they go. So the chips are down. We know what Leslie's planning. And we get... Wallenstein really does get to go out and I'm going to do a noble speech, but this one's full of back and forths. It's like little caveats and going, look, I'm really backed into a corner here. And he goes from, from one point to another, and he dances around an awful lot, and sort of everyone's going, yeah, no, you sold us on at the opening, it's fine, you didn't have to go into too much detail, it's fine, cool. Aliki then, Lynn.
Yeah, and also I think it's pretty clear whose side we're not meant to be on. We're not meant to be on Wallenstein's, or in fact, what's his name? Leslie's. But yeah, Wallenstein is not very convincing for all of his bluster, really. And Leslie is transparently, yes, and we will have castles.
Yes, because he starts off, oh, there are noble reasons. I love him, but I do not love his cause. Look, we're guests in this country. We can't rebel. That would be rude. It's just not done. But we'll also get all this lovely stuff. So it's like, Lynn.
Yeah. So the first thing I thought about in this scene was the two heads of state that Wallenstein has called a powwow with, are like, oh, you're being treated really badly. Oh yeah, we're totally on your side. Right. But the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So you've turned against your emperor and you're willing to be on our side. We'll take advantage of that. But they're, so that was so wrong of him to fire you for no reason. I don't think we're supposed to believe that. And then it occurs to me as the second movement of the scene progresses that, like, wait, Gordon was the one who put Wallenstein up to this in the first place. Not Gordon, Leslie. And Gordon was there. And they're like, oh yeah, it's very wrong of him. Wallenstein is doing the wrong thing and we have to tell the emperor on him. So I guess it's for Butler's sake that they're putting on this act, because he wasn't in the first scene. But both Gordon and Leslie were, and they were both saying, you should rebel, you should just disobey that order, you should just refuse to step down. And now they're saying, oh, that's not the right thing. So
there's really interesting dynamics going on there. Lois.
I think, again, you probably don't want comparisons, but Chapman's Baronne plays follow a very similar line, actually. There's somebody who encourages the Duc de Biron to rebel against Henry IV and then betrays him. And
spoilers, we're not there yet.
Right.
Not far off, actually, to be fair. It's coming up relatively soon.
But that I think the attraction of this for a dramatist and for his audience is that basically it shows all the enemy divided among themselves and betraying each other. And so even though they're being betrayed, I think Wallenstein is making league with what I think is the Protestant side. Still, it's betraying the emperor, and he's being betrayed in turn. So it doesn't reflect well on the enemy.
Sarah, muted at the moment.
Yeah, so I continued to be intrigued by Leslie because we weren't sure in the last scene, quite, was he a villain or wasn't he? But it turns out he indeed he was. But even though it becomes very clear in this scene, that he's done this deliberately, he's kicked off this whole rebellion on purpose. We don't know why. He hasn't said at all, like, what his motivation is. I think someone said earlier that he's a mercenary, so yeah, perhaps he's being paid to do it by one of the emperor's enemies or one of Wallenstein's enemies, or, but we really don't, I don't think we know why. Like we know what he's doing. We know what his intention is, and the fact that he's being so far incredibly successful, but it's not like he seems to have any personal animosity. He's enjoying his own brilliance at kind of the success of his plan, and he's like, making sure that he gets all his ducks in a row to have a continued success. But he's a bit of a blank wall in terms of what his intentions are, what's motivating him to do this, why normally with assuming that Albertus Wallenstein is it's the tragedy of Albertus Wallenstein, so assuming he is going to be the victim all this, usually is the nemesis. We know they have some kind of reason for doing what they're doing, like either good or evil, but here, like, I've no idea what's driving him.
I think that I mean, sort of stated it. He's led him to this rebellion that he thinks is, he's maneuvering to be doomed. So by doing that, everyone's going to thank him, and he's going to raise his status. I mean, it's a very dangerous plot, but I mean, he's basically said that's what they'll get out of it. And he does sort of say that, this Wallenstein made like a good easy mule I have led by the nose to this rebellion. So, and then he says, what we'll get out of this by suppressing it is we're going to get castles and it's a gambit. I mean, because he is just a mercenary. He has no status. So maybe starting wars is how he gets employed.
So this whole thing is basically for castles. That is just really interesting, because I don't remember a tragedy villain that's ever been quite that pragmatic. Normally they have some towering resentment,
some personal vendetta.
It doesn't feel at all personal at all.
No,
I mean, he genuinely. I think he may even be telling the truth when he says, I actually quite like him. That might not be a lie. He might think he's a perfectly nice chap. He's just an idiot who I'm using. He's far too noble for his own good. He clearly deserves to die. Anyway, we need to move on. But these are all good points. Act 2, Scene 2. We return to the subplot with enter Frederick, Albertus, and Newman. We've not met Frederick before, or maybe they've just been about, but we've definitely met Albertus and Newman before, and they have entered.
Pish, perish still in ignorance? Am I, who am grand master in the art of love, not able to instruct a limber youth of the first growth? Your brother here makes love in an ill-favoured tone, and screws his countenance as he were singing of lamentable ballads of Tilly's overthrow. But you, for your part, I've known you of an urchin, are so fiery you can speak all squibs and crackers. Carry a cannon in your mouth, you'll fright the lady. She'll imagine you come to ravish her.
The colonel tells you, your own good brother.
I've told you yours too, or I'm much mistaken. You love, should seem, the fair Emilia, a pretty wench, they say, but that's no matter. Your fathers are agreed on it, and you'd have me show you the readiest way how to accost her negatively. How to accost her. Negatively, I will demonstrate instantly.
I shall observe your doctrine most exactly.
Pray, observe. You must not then accost her with a shrug, as you were lousy with your lady, sweet lady, or most super excellent lady, nor in the Spanish garb with a state face, as you had been eating of a radish and meant to swallow her for mutton to it. Nor let your words, as that I'm most afraid of, because 'tis your natural mood, come rumbling forth, ushered with a good full-mouthed oath, I love you, but speak the language of an overcoming lover. I do not mean that strange pedantic phrase used by some gallants who do aim at wit and make themselves stark asses by it. Praise their mistresses by the sun and stars, while the poor girls imagine they mean their signs, their mercers or perfumers in habitat. For For sure, beyond those planets, they've studied no astrology. But you must, in gentle, free, and genuine phrase, deliver your true affection. Praise her eye, her lip, her nose, her cheek, her chin, her neck, her breast, her hand, her foot, her leg, everything. And leave your roses and your lilies for your country froze to make nosegays of. Stay, here comes your mistress, her father too, in conference. Fall on my myrmidon while we retreat.
Enter Weimar and Emilia.
Be your endeavours, brother.
And exeunt Newman and Albertus.
Tis so concluded, twixt me and her father, for both our goods. Be not you nice, Emilia? The noble youth so furnished with all worth, you needs must like him.
Good sir, give me license to let my eye direct my heart to love, and if young Frederick be the master of such absolute gifts, doubt not but I shall find them.
My lord, I'm glad of this fair interview. I and my daughter were even conferring of you, sir. As yet, she's something timorous, dreads a soldier's looks.
She needs not, sir. She bears a spell about her that would charm a Scythian's native fierceness into softness. Those spirit-breathing eyes, my lord, which can kill as they please, or quicken with a glance.
Now they are entered, I'll steal away and leave them.
Gentle lady, to make the address of my lovesick heart plain and apparent to you, that you may search through my soul and find it all your creature, give me your patient hearing.
'Tis a request might tax my manners, should I deny it to one of your noble quality. Use your pleasure.
Which consists of viewing your bright beauty, the idea of all perfections, which the jealous heavens durst ever lend to earth divinest lady, the gentle air which circumscribes your cheek, leaving its panting kisses on the flowers that in the Tempe blossom, does not love those fields of purity more than mine eyes do. Mine, lady, is a holy, an intellectual zeal, such as the angels and saints, who know no sexes, do affect by. Past imitation, too, should they who strive to trace me take the constancy of swans or never-changing turtles as their patterns.
Sir, it seems you've studied compliment as well as arms. But he's a foolish lover who to gain his mistress dare not promise what you have uttered. But I must have more than verbal assurance of your love.
By your fair self, I'm real, do intend what I've delivered with as much true zeal as anchorites do their prayers. I love your mind, your excellent mind, and for its sake the pure shrine which contains that blessing, this fair building, this palace of all happiness, and entreat you, as you have mercy in you, to take pity upon my love's stern sufferings and redress them by your consent to take me for your husband.
Sir, you are an over-hasty lover to imagine I can, at first sight of your person, be surprised and yield. They must be strong allurements, must tempt a bashful virgin, still inured to no companion but her fears and blushes, to give her heart away, and live in thraldom unto a stranger.
Love, madam, has eagle's eyes. It can beget acquaintance even in a moment, suddenly as time, the time that does succeed it. Farewell, I will not have my over-hasty zeal urge your mild sufferance further. Pray, think on me as one who played my full extent of bliss in your enjoyment. Think you are the land rack by which the brittle vessel of my hopes must through love's swelling ocean be directed to a safe harbor. Honor me to kiss your fair hand. Lady, now farewell. No bliss can be in love till we know what it is.
And they exit. I mean, this is an interesting scene because if we hadn't had the opening with Newman sort of demonstrating how to woo, What would we make of the scene and what Frederick is saying in isolation? It's really interesting about what that introduction does to the scene that follows, because otherwise it's quite conventional. I mean, there's sort of these backs and forwards, and a similar mirror to the scene we had earlier. But by having effectively Newman doing his as pointed out in the chat, the pickup artist routine, a lot of which I wasn't really sure what on earth he was actually saying. Towards the end, it sort of started making some sort of sense, like say her nose is nice. But before that, it was just, what's this stuff about eating a radish and looking what is it? Don't blush. Is that what he was? I don't know what half that was about. But I kind of again was quite interested in Newman. I don't like Newman, but I don't think we're supposed to, so I kind of am taking some comfort from that. Lynn, and then muted present, and then Lois.
Well, quite apart from Newman's dubious advice, what are we to make of this in light of the fact that we know it is 100% a political marriage? Frederick and Emilia don't really have a choice. This was proposed by Emilia's father, and Wallenstein accepted in his son's absence. But Frederick has decided to go with the game, and instead of saying, well, looks like we're going to do this, I'm going to try to be a good husband to you. Are you down with that? And she goes, yeah, we don't have any choice. I'm going to try to make it work too. You seem nice enough. Nobody says that, I guess. But Frederick decides to play the game. So it is sort of like, what do we make of this in any case? Because I mean, what are the chances that Frederick is sincere? He doesn't have any choice, and neither does she. So it's a weird little game that we really are very aware this is not a love match.
Yeah, and it's adding layers and layers of complications as to what's going on in the scene, and I find that really interesting. Actually, I think there's something really really clever at work for what is again not very long and quite demonstrative in its its poetry. It's quite flamboyant still. It's just a different kind of flamboyance. I'm fascinated by this style. Lois, and then Alan.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably I think Newman's speech is really a kind of tour de force. It's an opportunity for the actor to impersonate different kinds of unsuccessful or undesirable wooers. So the Spanish type, and the idea of the shrug giving the impression that you're trying to shake off the lice on your clothes, and the good full-mouthed oath and so on. I mean, I think it's probably just a sort of fun speech in its own right. But it does mean that, as if we didn't know it already, that the whole dialogue between Frederick and Emilia is just putting on an act. It's one more example, really, of the hypocrisy and phoniness of just about everything anybody says to anybody else in this play.
And there's something, the whole thing. I mean, it'd be quite interesting. Is Emilia coming on just reading through the script of what she's supposed to do in this situation? Does she have a sort of courtiers are from Mars and princesses are from Venus kind of thing? Because it'd be quite interesting if Emilia has basically gone through the same routine with her waiting maids or something like that, and that both of them are doing a performance that nobody else is watching. But they're going through it anyway, and they're saying potentially quite interesting in that. Alan?
Yeah, I just went back and looked at the dramatic personae, because what isn't made clear is that Frederick is also a son to Wallenstein. Although it would be more normal for the elder son to have to carry the same given name as the father. I'm getting the impression that Frederick here is possibly slightly older than Albertus.
Again, I don't think we've got any meaningful data on that. But maybe he just thought they were a better match. I don't know how that logic is. But yes, there are two sons. And we haven't even met the sons of the emperor yet. So there's more to come. There's more to come. Okay. Any other thoughts? Otherwise, we'll move into the next scene. No. Okay. Act 2, Scene 3. Enter Ferdinand, King of Hungary, Gallas, Questenberg, and the Emperor.
Crowns are perpetual cares, and to their heads that wear the wreath imperial are annexed foreign invasions. And to their heads that wear the wreath imperial are annexed. That doesn't make, the cares are annexed, but why are the crowns annexed? Well, never mind. Foreign invasions oft may shake a state, but civil broils are the impetuous firebrands that burn up commonwealths. To quench a flame domestic we are met, which will like fame increase by going on. This late revolt of Wallenstein.
Hideous slave, on whom your plenteous bounties showered so fast, they seem to drown him. He whose great commands could not know aught above them but yourself, the general of your forces of Glaue, Mecklenburg, Sagan, Friedland, starve the Duke. He to invert your own arms against yourself, swells my vexed soul to think on't.
'Tis not words or airy threatenings will appease thy mischief. It must be done by force. Matthias Gallas, have you, according to our late commands, given order for the levying new forces to oppose this traitor?
Mighty sir, I have, and seen them mustered.
To what amounts their number?
70,000.
Your royal army, had they been trained in military discipline, experience is half the soul of arms. We will take order to have them taught the exercise of arms by those Hungarian troops which we brought hither.
Enter a messenger.
Now, sir, your business.
Mighty sir, the governor of Agers, Colonel Gordon, attended by Lieutenant Colonel Butler and Colonel Lesle, do desire admittance into your presence.
Let them enter.
Infer the exit of a messenger.
They are his friends, and may perhaps discover some of his treacheries.
Enter Lesle, Gordon, and Butler.
Noble strangers, welcome. I do conceive 'tis business of importance has drawn you hither. In Colonel Leslie's looks I read affairs of consequence, with which his active brain does teem, and fain would be by his tongue delivered.
Most mighty Caesar, to endear the service to you, I shall do you, by gilding o'er each circumstance its weight and consequence, since 'tis my bounden duty to you, my royal master, would but show pride and arrogant love in me the author to my own act, and so 'twould rather lessen than amplify my merit, how I've served you under command of him, whom in due justice I cannot mention now without foul curses. Revolted Wallenstein is to these lords and your great self best known.
And our rewards shall strive to pay those services.
But when I saw him put off his faith, abandon his allegiance, accounting all your bounteous favours trifles unto the mountainous pile of his deservings, and like a black cloud hung o'er all your empire, uncertain where to break, and in his vast thoughts aspired your sacred dignity and life, I, like his genius screwed into his counsels, explored his plots and treasons, and have found them so full of eminent danger.
So malicious.
Empty of worth and honour. It had been a sin beyond the horridest punishments to have concealed them from you, and which most tortures my loyal thoughts, as it had not been sufficient for him to rebel himself, he has formed a league defensive and offensive with your most eager enemies, Saxon Waymar, Brandenburg, Arheim, and Gustavus Horn, and had a personal meeting for that purpose.
And 'tis to be feared that if sudden power stop not their progress, they will with speedy violence invade you here in your capital city.
Worthy strangers, in this one act you've shown yourselves more faithful than all my homeborn subjects. But be sure, if gratitude can equal your deserts, you shall enjoy that amply. Noble Lesle, the time is come now, and the dilemma cast, that must conclude our empire, which we must unto thy care commit. To kill a traitor is a deserving action, for thou strikest then with the sword of justice. Wilt thou add this one act to thy former high deservings? Kill this arch rebel?
As an office we should have begged. Believe it, he's dead already. I'll kill him in his pride, in all his glories, with such security as I would sleep after a tedious watching.
And expect whate'er your hopes can wish. So, with all speed back to your charge, be careful. Come, my lords, fate now doth smile upon us, and the storm which threatened us is suddenly grown calm.
And exeunt the Emperor, Hungary, Questenberg, etc., leaving Lesle behind.
Now our hopes may rest, best friends, assured of good success. 'Tis in our hands, our fates, and we have hearts dare venture on this giant duke, and lift him with as much ease from earth as the bright sun does dull and lazy vapours. Nor let dangers fright us from the achievement, since the justice the cause does carry is a certain armour against all the assaults of peril, which in itself is but an April storm, no sooner shown to fright the air, but by the next wind o'erblown.
And exit. I can't call the villain Lesle. I'm just finding it just doesn't have enough. Leslie. Leslie. I'm going with. Though that might be an overstatement, but it's definitely. There is something about these court scenes where people are explaining, because what keeps happening is, of course, people come on and explain to somebody else something that we in the audience already know. We're getting a lot of that now. And it's like, let's list all the people who are defecting. Let's list all the things, let's list a load of names. And it's not quite landing for me in the way that I think evil plotting should. I mean, there's some good stuff in here, but it's like there isn't really anything to say. It's like, here is the plot, let's reiterate the plot, we'll reiterate the plot again, without really developing the plot very much. Sarah.
Well, I think that it's a good point, but perhaps it might make it a good one for an audio production then. In terms of staging it in a theatre with bodies, there is just going to be a lot of standing around pontificating, which I know happens a lot in a lot of plays, but usually the pontificating has quite a compelling purpose, or whatever. But I'm wondering if maybe the fact that everything keeps being repeated, so that we're absolutely sure the audience knows who everyone is and what they're up to, maybe that would make it quite good for audio.
The only reason I'll go against that, one thing I found with doing these plays as audio is that actually sometimes stuff that is just speechifying just slides out one ear and in one ear and out the other, without the visual thing to hold it together. Even if all you're doing is talking to an audience, sometimes that visualness helps lock it in place in a way that you're going, oh, this speech will be great in audio, and then you go, actually no, it's not landing at all. And I sort of worry that there's a bit of this here that we need, even if it's not an exciting visual image, you need that visual image to lock the information in. Because I'm struggling to follow this text, it has to be said. I'm enjoying it, I'm liking its florid style, but actually in terms of imparting information, I'm frequently not sure why anything's happening, or in fact what is happening. I'm much more keyed into it now, but that first scene I did find was quite tricky. Lynn.
Yeah, right. You made that point ages ago, and I had never thought of that. And like a light bulb went off when I said, "Oh, this is long speeches. Maybe it should be a audio, and you're like, nah, actually, that counterintuitively enough, long speeches work better on stage because the audience can look and see how the rest of the performers on stage are reacting. That's actually what goes on there. So theater practitioners out there, take that to heart. So I think maybe the thing to do is get out your editor's scalpel and do some like surgical cutting. I think, audiences today have less tolerance for these long things than making the point of, yes, they use florid language, can be made in fewer lines. But that's going to be hard. You're going to need a really good editor because it is verse, and it's pretty good verse. So editing that is always trickier because you got to make the line lengths and the iambs come out. So that's trickier than editing prose. And the other thing I kind of is the takeaway from this scene is that Lesle, our political mover here, might be the only one in the room who's not kind of dumb. He definitely seems to be the smartest guy around every time. Everyone else seems to be really gullible.
And yeah, I mean, the other problem with if you want to try and trim it back is it's not very long to start with. I mean, if you start cutting it, we start running out of an evenings of theatre, because it's going to be 75 minutes with an interval if you start cutting it, which is a way of doing it, of course, and may be quite exciting. But it says it's only 14,500 words textually, which is not excessive, not short, but not excessive. Lois.
Well, the way to do it anyway, I think, given that it's not a terribly colorful play, would be to cut it and then intersperse some scenes of pageantry and music, which could easily be done. I mean, there could be songs, there probably are songs from the 30 Years' War that one could use, and maybe something to give a sense of what has been going on, possibly projections, telling about the story so far. You'd pretty much have to have that, actually. Otherwise, unless you do it at a conference that's on the 30 Years' War, most people wouldn't have any idea who all these people are.
I think the play does expose who, within the play's logic. I don't necessarily know you need to know, the wider thing. I mean, you can, but I think the play is complete in and of itself in that sense.
I don't know. There's a curious lack of reference to the existence of Protestants and Catholics, which is sort of what this is all about. I mean, it all started with James's son-in-law accepting the throne of Bohemia, and in fact, the person who was meant to have it and who was rejected then became the leader of the Holy Roman Empire. In other words, the guy who's called the emperor here, and then it kind of goes on from there.
In the sense, the play world is clearly not interested in any of that. It's just a general and his emperor. I don't know that the play cares in that sense. I don't know that we're missing anything in that sense.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. I get the impression that it's sort of I think there was pretty much a ban on discussing religion on stage anyway, and so there's a sense that all these people are somehow ignoring their own religious beliefs in the various alliances that they make and the conspiracies that they engage in, and possibly that's the point that the audience would be taking in, the complete lack of importance that these characters are giving to religion, even though it is actually the ultimate cause of the war. I don't know. There are other things you could have, like the Scots characters all wearing distinctive clothing, and so there'd be some sense of people's identities here.
Yes. Anyway, we need to dive into Act 3. We have a couple of short scenes to go through. We'll run them back to back. Act 3, Scene 1. Enter Frederick and Emilia.
Divinest lady, I hope your late refusal of my love is altered now by your more gentle pity. My constancy carries more strength about it than to be blasted with your first repulse. In the same righteous cause of my affection, I must again be advocate, and hope my suit will be effected.
Alas, my lord, make me not thus the subject of your mirth or compliment. Your soul is too secure in its own manly virtues from surprise of weak affection, especially of mine, who am so worthless myself. I cannot boast those high glories as to be victorious over so brave a conqueror.
Those bright eyes, like heaven's blessed light, when from a mist of clouds he peeps and gilds the earth with brightness, can quicken and fire even marble hearts with love, thaw souls of ice. My Emilia, a malefactor's fears are more upon him ere he do come to trial than when he hears the judge pronounce the sentence of his death. 'Tis so with me, and I should be more blessed to hear that voice of yours, that angel's voice, too sweet for such dire use, with a severe refusal strike me dead, than live tormented in a sad suspense, ignorant of my destiny.
My lord, if I should frame my virgin thoughts to love, they should be fixed on you. But I'm so well content and settled in a virgin life, I cannot wish to change it.
Not to embrace a larger stock of happiness, Emilia? Virginity is but a single good, a happiness which, like a miser's wealth, is as from others, so from your own use locked up and closely cabined, since it not admits communication of its good. When you shall in the state of marriage freely taste nature's choice pleasures, that same happiness you were created for.
You have prevailed, sir. You who are still victorious o'er your foes must needs remain a conqueror o'er your friends. My lord, receive me freely. I am yours forever.
This chaste kiss shall seal the contract. Come, my Emilia, love is such a wealth as must be gained by free consent, not stealth.
And we infer their exit. Act 3, Scene 2, enter Wallenstein, Duchess, Newman, Tertski, Kintski, and Ilor.
Are they agreed yet, Newman?
Faith, my lord, the virgin lady's something fearful. Fears a man of war should board her, lest his charge should make her keel split. My lord Frederick is of that rough demeanour. Spite of my instructions, he will never learn to woo in the due phrase and garb.
I do admire the fond base carriage of our giddy youth in love affairs, and grieve to see my sons, who should inherit from me my great spirit as well as fortune, so degenerate from my masculine courage, when in the blooming pride of my green youth I flourished, my desires aimed always rather in that tented field to spend my hours than on a downy couch. To see the face of a stern enemy besmeared with blood pleased me far better than a lady's looks.
And yet you vowed ere you won me, my lord, you ne'er saw object that so much pleased your appetite.
Perhaps I might, for the obtaining of my ends, descend from my great spirit, so much as to decline to idle courtship. The birds and beasts will do it to sate their appetites. The fiery steed that in the fervor of a fight oft times neighs courage to his rider, when provoked with eager heat, will lick and bite his female into the same desire. The sparrow's bill, and with a chirping rhetoric seem to court enjoyment of their wishes, which fulfilled dulls their head. They couch beneath their wings of their past pleasures, and in a slumber forfeit all remembrance of their past pleasures. Yet insatiate man in his desire, more hot than steeds or sparrows, will, to obtain it, quite divest his soul of all that's masculine in him, and transform his very being into a woman.
Sure, my lord intends to write some proclamation against wearing Holland smocks, some furious edict against charitable leaguerers. I've known him, and so have you, my lords, for all this heat, gainst womanhood pursue a suitless fro, and she had but one eye neither, with as much zeal as ere knight-errant did his fair Lindiabrides or Claridiana.
And enter Frederick and Emilia, and I'll take on Frederick.
My lord, your son and fair Emilia.
The quarrel's reconciled. I'll lay my life on it.
Beauteous lady, the contract twixt me and your father touching the marriage twixt my son and your fair self, I hope by your consent is ratified. My boy looks sprightly, as if he were new returned from a triumphant victory.
My lord, I am so much a master of my wishes, by being blessed in this fair lady's love, I cannot wish a happiness above what I possess. Would only you be pleased to destiny the most welcome hour for the consummation of our nuptials?
It shall be accomplished with all the speed that preparations can be made for the solemnity. Your news, sir.
Enter page.
My lord, there's Colonel Gordon and some others newly arrived from Eggers, beg admittance into your presence.
Let them enter. They are my noble friends. Madam, take the bride Emilia to your charge, Frederick. You have to leave to wait on your mistress.
And exuent Duchess Frederick, Emilia Page, enter Gordon, Leslie, and Butler.
Worthy friends, you're dearly welcome. I presume the business must be of much importance that could draw you, without giving us first notice of it, from Eggers hither.
A mighty sir, our fortunes, our honours, lives, whatsoe'er we can call ours, are such a debt to you that we're engaged to sacrifice them all in any service for you, especially in this affair we're now arrived about, since it concerns your precious life, which by that tyrant Caesar, at half the price and value of his empire, is set to sale.
Horror! As how, good colonel?
When you shall know, sir, the traitors, such his malice would have made them, picked out for the assassinates of your person, you'll bless you from his treacheries as from infectious damps. For the men, best general, are of such bosom trust, so near allied to all your counsels, 't'had been as easy for them to have acted your sad ruin as it is for me to speak this.
Very strange. Pray name them.
Even ourselves, our faithful, innocent selves, were these same monsters, designed for to put in act his purpose, who, because we were mercenaries in this warfare, he thought as easily we would sell our faiths, courted us therefore with whole piles of honours, mountains of titles, mines of endless riches. But where our honours stand in competition, these are but frivolous baits, trifles for children to play and toy withal. Our faiths are crystal, which poison cannot vitiate.
And our love shall strive by yours to take a fair example, how to requite your truth. But pray, what answer returned you to this man more great in mischiefs than he's in power or title?
I entertained his proffered bounties with a specious show of thankfulness. Nay, promised to effect his damned intent, besought him not to employ any other instruments but ourselves to accomplish the ruin of your person, by this means to free your dear life from the imminent danger of being by others aimed at.
These strangers' loves surpass credit.
Now thank you for this same preserval of my life, best friends, were to admit your action might receive by gratitude a satisfaction. But pray, divide my soul, my life, and fortunes are at your disposition. Noble lords, that this base emperor seeks to take my life by treachery is an apparent sign. He fears that I should live, and half victorious ere blow be strucken are they whom their foes dread ere they do behold them. Let's go in then, armed with our aids, backed with our cause's justice against this insulting emperor, and resolve to pull the tyrant from his throne, destroy his very name, his memory, his ashes, with as much easy freedom as rough winds demolish crazy buildings. Colonel Gordon, some 5 days hence we shall arrive at Eggers, there to make preparation for the nuptials betwixt our son and fair Emilia. Come, lords, since we amongst ourselves are true, conquest is ours, which we'll with speed pursue.
And exit Wallenstein and Why is things happen? Why? What? Okay. So Leslie has decided to undouble cross Wallenstein and tell him that he was thing, and now he's even better buddies with Wallenstein. Is that part of the plan to murder Wallenstein later as a more convenient juncture? It's just it's like Sarah was saying earlier. I don't know why. What was his motive for doing things? I mean, what was his motive for doing the thing that we don't understand that he's doing? It's like, I could understand why someone would betray someone. I don't understand why they would unbetray them without some kind of... I mean, did the emperor just serve really rubbish canapes? Was it that's like, this was the welcome we got? I've just betrayed some people and you've just... there are only 3 profiteroles. I mean, what? Sarah, and then Lynn.
Well, I mean, you've got to admire the playwright for keeping us on our toes. I mean, yeah, because what I was saying earlier about how usually we know with a tragic villain like what his motivation is for wreaking vengeance on the hero. It's like, this is just taking it to a whole new level now. And he's such a cipher, this Leslie character. It's like he's just, and I'm wondering if the key to it is what in fact you were saying earlier about it just comes down to the plain fact he's a mercenary. He's maybe just playing both sides to see what the best outcome is going to be. He's sort of hedging his bets. He's implicitly he's maneuvered himself into a place where he's implicitly trusted by both, so therefore he's kind of in a fantastic position to betray either of them, and so he's maybe just waiting to see which way the wind blows and which way is going to come out most profitable for him is all I can assume. But he's a fascinating character just because he's so empty of motivation, and he just like you can't just when you think you've got a handle on who he is, he slips through your fingers.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is maybe we're trying to read this as a tragedy when we should be trying to read this as a history. And sometimes what happens with history plays is they've read the outline of the history, but they haven't figured out why anyone does anything. So it's just he's doing it because that's what happened, without going into the kind of actually why and hasn't got there yet. Because often with history, lots of stuff happens and you're not quite sure what's going on. And it's, if you just look at the précis of action. So it might be that actually that's more what's going on here, that the playwright can't square the circle because the circle isn't wholly known, but maybe not, because I don't know the history at all. I know of the existence of this figure. That is it, and I have and at the moment I say I'm not interested in what the actual history was, and I'm just more interested in what this player is doing. And yeah, it's doing weird things. Lynn, then Lois.
Yeah, kind of just what Sarah said, that we really don't know what his long game is. It could be by telling Wallenstein, they tried to hire us to kill you. He puts himself deeper into Wallenstein's trust in order to position himself to carry out the assassination later. Or maybe he's betraying the emperor, hoping that Wallenstein's faction will reward him more generously. Or maybe, like Sarah says, he's waiting to see who gives him implicitly the best offer. So that, yeah, the fact that we're not we don't really know, I think it's really interesting. I think that could really work. Although I was like, yeah, speaking of taking out your pruning shears, do you want to cut that whole speech of Wallenstein's about, yeah, I know I wooed you, but I was horny?
I don't know. There's something interesting about what that does to the character and what that does to the relationship. I mean, and especially with his wife literally there. I mean, the Duchess is standing there, and she says, "I don't recall it going down like that, dear." And he goes off in that sort of weird direction. I think that does speak to the culture of this court in a way. It explains a lot about his sons and the company they keep. It's a soldier family kind of logic.
Yeah, well, the whole the culture of the culture, in fact. Yeah, I mean, basically, when war is a kind of incessant background reality, I mean, they call this the 30 Years' War because it lasted like 32 years or something. That sort of martial ethic pervades sort of everybody's way of being in the world. It's as off-putting as I might find it. It's that's how things were.
And also, whether, he's in company here, maybe he thinks he's telling a charming anecdote. So this thing is, he just doesn't, there is a sort of weird bluffness to Wallenstein. There's a certain attempt at heartiness that I've feels strained, that he's trying, but he's not very good at it. That's quite interesting. Anyway, sorry, Lois,
Oh, yeah. Well, I was wondering whether Newman's speech beginning, "Sure, my lord intends to write some proclamation," that's presumably addressed just to his mates around him and not to Wallenstein. I mean, because he goes on to say that, "I've known him, and so have you, my lords, for all this heat against womanhood, pursue a sutler's frau." I mean, he talks about Wallenstein apparently being after some hideous-looking lower-class woman. I take it that's what he's talking about here, and it's that I can't imagine him saying that in front of Wallenstein's wife, although who knows?
I wouldn't put it past Newman, to be honest. I mean, that's sort of the kind of character he is. And, things like referencing Holland and Ligas is again coding that people would be getting at the time as well. There's which a modern audience won't. But we'll get to that later on. In the
other
future.
thing, regarding, I don't know, Leslie's motives and the whole way this is working. I think the template for this is Volpone. Both Volpone and Mosca are too clever for their own good. I mean, each of them gets involved in a scheme that's actually counterproductive, like Mosca wanting Bonario to overhear his father making his will, which leads to his being there in time to prevent Volpone from raping Celia. And then Volpone's decision to announce that he's dead, and he just says airily, "Oh, my recovery will retrieve all," not thinking that he's really put everything into Mosca's hands at that point. I mean, and I think Volpone does recognize that he's been playing too many tricks, that he got carried away and that he's trapped himself. And I think, whether Leslie is being too clever for his own good, I don't know, but it's kind of that type of plot where you just get trick upon trick upon trick and the audience doesn't really know where it is. And you may not need any motive except that.
Yeah. Also in this scene, or the scene before, but it's effectively sort of the two flow into each other. Frederick and Emilia, of course, have sort of come to an agreement. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that. I'll just witter on for a moment. Oh no, Aliki.
I mean, it's another version of the scene we had with Albertus and the other woman. It's, "Oh, I am too virginal to think about this, but if I did think about it, it would be you."
Yeah.
This chaste kiss shall seal the contract. It's it has been.
It's a template as well. Emilia's just going through the motions, isn't she? First, she apparently rejects him first time round, and it's quite clearly because I can't possibly accept you for the first time you offer. And then the second time round, it's oh, good heavens, you can't really mean it. And then, well, if I did marry anybody, it would be you, but I still like my virgin life. And then, well, okay, you've conquered. I mean, it's just such a, here are the 3 steps to the engagement that you've got to go through.
No, I'm thinking structurally now, because we're at the point where if it's a modern production and we're not running it straight through, which we could do, where would we put the interval? Would we put it in here with a spotlight on Leslie's face at the end, just looking at the audience, giving a knowing wink or something? Because I don't know if it is. There may be something in the next scene that feels more like an interval, but to leave the audience very confused at this point is an interesting place to leave them. Obviously not a problem the original production would have had, but we're thinking about what we might do with it today as we go into final thoughts. And as Sarah is waving, I'll throw final thoughts to you. You can respond to what I just said and then throw in your additional final thoughts if you so wish.
Yeah, I think it's the perfect place to put the interval, because they're all going to go to the bar going, "What?" And they're all going to spend the next 20 minutes like arguing about, "Oh yeah, no, he's on this side, no, he's on this side, no, he's not on anyone's side but his side." Yeah, no, I think it's a really good place to put an interval. Thoughts about it? I don't really have a lot of thoughts about it, honestly. I'm finding it interesting. I'm finding it a hard read. I put this in the chat earlier. Like, I don't know if it's because the prose is quite purple, or the syntax. The sentences are very long and strung over so many lines of verse. But I'm finding it quite hard sometimes to like pass the meaning of what it is I'm actually saying as I'm saying it. Yeah, maybe that's just maybe distracting me because I'm more focused on the actual meaning of what I'm reading rather than, the subtle shifts of what's going on in the play. But I think it's fun so far. It's a bit daft. I'm finding several of the characters, well, yeah, I don't think I've met anybody actually yet who I particularly like, but that's okay because I don't really care what happens to any of them. And yeah, I think this could be made into quite a sort of for some reason I've got those that sort of Saturday morning thing, which I don't think happens anymore for kids today. But when I was a kid in like the early 80s, you would get stuff on you get a whole load of stuff on programs on a Saturday morning, or like in the school holidays, you get a whole load of stuff on in the morning, and it was just all a bit daft, and you get one program after the other, and it was full of daring do and full of adventure, and you didn't really care about any of it, but it was kind of like, just kind of fun stuff to watch on a morning. And I'm kind of feeling a bit like that, that it's kind of all a bit Flash Gordon, only historic rather than futuristic.
Yeah, and this is why I sort of did a call back to the 1580s. It isn't really interested in what's going on in people's inner lives. That's not to say it's failing to do psychology. It's not interested in psychology. I don't think this play cares. I could be wrong on that point. We may go on a journey later on, but there is a certain surface posing to it that again feels very old school. And it's interesting when we, because our sort of arrow of time at time of recording, we've got up to the early 17th century. We're up to about 1604 in sort of a sense of completism, and we've done a few things in between this play, but this is very late in the timeline, but it feels weirdly old, and I'm assuming that's deliberate and intentional. And on a practical level, it feels quite stageable in the sense that it doesn't feel like it actually has a massive cast. I think you could double up some of these people similarly to how we've done. It's need more than we've got in the room now, but it doesn't feel like it requires a massive army to wander on and off. Because actually, we were talking about what we might put in between, or to give a sense of impetus. It's not like there's any armies marching across the stage and back again, and it doesn't feel like the play is interested in armies marching back and forth, or at least not yet. So I'm curious to see what will happen as we go forward. Lois, any final thoughts?
Not really. I think it's aiming for a certain style. I mean, there are times it reminds me of Fletcher because there's one of his mannerisms which the characters frequently use. It's something like you're acting basely, yes, very basely. I mean, this kind of repetition, and there are quite a few examples of it. But in a way, it's also Fletcherian in the behavior of the young men, I suppose, or at least some of that back chat. But it's also going for something, I think, probably more like Chapman, something that is fairly serious about politics and history, but has to avoid a lot of the subject matter and kind of is padding it out with particularly this romantic stuff, which is presumably fictitious anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting because we got the two sons and only one of them sort of got engaged. The other one sort of entered some interesting opening gambits. But he's creating a sort of world, and there is sort of back and forth going on. Alan, any final thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. I I don't trust any of the three mercenaries as far as I can throw up. Certainly wouldn't buy a used horse from any of them. They're basically in it for themselves, and it's becoming increasingly clear. Be interesting to see how any of this resolves over the remaining 50%.
Or less than 50%. Anyway, we've
Yeah.
slightly crossed the halfway mark. Lynn, any final thoughts?
I really don't know where to have this. I mean, I think, Rob, you're right that it has this sort of retro feel about it. There's something kind of 1580s about the fact that it's not really interested in people's motivations, and it's kind of more about the posing. Okay, and you could actually use that as a way into it these days because we are so far distant from the actual events of the play. But in why, if you're going to go for that as a playwright, set it in this contemporary, like, ongoing situation. I mean, the war on the continent, England didn't officially enter into the 30 Years' War, as I understand it. They never officially took a side, but the Civil War is coming right up. So, like, the religious tensions are peaking, death and violence. I mean, the stakes of the situation where this play is set are massively high. So if you're kind of gonna go for that, this is sort of this fantasy fictional universe where we don't really care. Why choose that setting? So those two things seem to be in tension. So I haven't found a way to sort of read this play. Like, my secret decoder ring is not working.
Maybe we're just trying to apply too many lenses onto something that is relatively simple. I sort of suspect, as Lois has made the point, of course, because we haven't done a lot in the intervening years between this, of course, it may be reflecting a lot of stuff that has come before it in much closer time. But I'm sort of interested in sort of nostalgia and how it affects people generationally to plays that they've read about and revived over time, and how that intersects. So how does this speak to other plays that have happened in the past and in its then current present, which we have not looked at yet in any great detail. We will get there. By the time we do a second look on this, we might be a bit closer to this in first looks on stuff. Aliki, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I found it reasonably enjoyable. But this same thing that we keep bringing up, that there doesn't seem to be a lot of depth to it. I suppose one way to stage it is to use it as a scaffold on which to disrupt these performances of honor and loyalty and romance, and have a bit of fun with that. I could enjoy that, and there's certainly been some nice chewy sentences to speak, which, we could have some fun with this, I think.
Yeah, I think there is something actually to be dug out of the Frederick and Emilia and the sort of love, inverted commas, love, the courtship rituals that are going on there. But again, I'm sort of wondering if we try and layer in meaning onto it, that it'll just sort of slide off the side and flop around on the floor, and we should just sort of go for it with, gusto and hope for the best. I mean, maybe the Flash Gordon and the 1930s Flash Gordon might be the way to go for it. Let's do a close up on a giant iguana and see how the battling goes. Didn't think that was how I was going to end the session. Never mind. Any additional thoughts anyone wants to throw in before I close the session? No. Okay, we have one more session. We're going to find out what happens to Wallenstein. I don't know. As we go into the close of the action, all that remains is thank all the wonderful readers for all their wonderful reading. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye. The birds and beasts will do it to sate their appetites.